All right. So welcome to our class meeting today. I wanted to take some time as you guys are getting started on poetry analysis to talk a little bit about how to approach this and what you are or should be focusing on as we're taking a look at poetry. So one of the things that um, I had planned for us to do in class that we probably aren't well, aren't going to get to do a whole lot of is um, we have this really great book called The Poet X, which we've been teaching this year and last year. And we were supposed to be reading that later in the semester. But because we're not all in school and we don't have copies of it, one of the things that we've done is take some of the activities on the Poet X and move those over into this assignment that you're focusing on right now. So I'm going to share my screen with you and talk through a quick example of kind of what I'm asking you to do in the poetry analysis so that you have that as an example of what you might want to do. This assignment, the poetry analysis playlist, is, can everybody see that? Like you're seeing a shot of Google Classroom at the moment? I hope. Yeah, okay, good. Sometimes the screen sharing thing is a little weird. So in the poetry analysis playlist, what I'm asking you to do is to choose a poem or a couple of poems that you might potentially want to work with. Ultimately, what you're going to be doing is writing kind of an analysis of that poetry. So we'll start here. So there's nothing graded about this. There's just so that you know, hopefully this is a chance for you guys to ask some questions. Thank you for being here today. So if you've had a chance to look at this week's assignment, do you have any kind of immediate questions about that one? Okay, so here's the deal with the Poet X. So we didn't get to read this together, but one of the options that you'll have in working with the poetry analysis is to take a second to read some portions of it. So the novel is framed as a series of excerpts from a poetry journal. And the main character in the novel, whose name is Xiomara Batista, is a 10th grader, and she's a poet, and she's writing in this journal for herself. And so in order for you to help you understand that, I created this like one pager for you that gives you a little bit of information about the novel and about the background of the novel. Elizabeth Azevedo, who wrote the novel, is based in Washington, D.C. She used to teach middle school English in Prince George's County. So the novel was originally intended really for her students. That was her audience. She really wanted to write a novel that she felt would relate to her students' lives and would help them to see themselves in literature in a way that maybe they weren't able to before. So what we're going to do right now is take a quick look at one excerpt from the novel, and this is this screencast or this slides presentation is posted in Classroom, so you can click on it there. But I'm going to put the poem up on the screen so that you can see it. So this poem is called Music for A, and it's a poem that's written from the main character, Siamata, to Anan, who's the boy that she likes in her science class. And I want you to take a quick look at the poem and think for a second about what you see in terms of structures. So how is the poem structured? How many lines are in each stanza? And what do you notice about the way that it's structured? So take a second to read the poem. And think for a second about what do you notice about its structure? So in the chat, why don't you go ahead and write your initial responses? What do you see in this poem when you first look at it? So now that you've had a chance to take a look at this, Kate, you're noticing it has lots of breaks. These breaks like in the middle of the lines, right, seem important. The poem is relatively short, right? It has one longer stanza and then a one-line stanza and then a three-line stanza. And when I use that term stanza, what I'm referring to are like the structural groups within the poem, kind of like paragraphs, but for poems. So let's look at some observations that we can make about this. Ms. Hashem Lyles went through and helped us out by annotating this a little bit so that we can see some of the structural elements of the poem. So you'll notice that this extra spacing that you notice there, Kate, it's always in the middle of the line, and that helps create a kind of pause or a rhythm to the poem. It's informal in its word choice, so it's not a whole lot of, there's not a whole lot of imagery, there's not a whole lot of metaphor, it's fairly straightforward. And it's really, I mean, it's a love poem, right? It's a poem about how this particular person feels about someone else. So it does rely very heavily on imagery and has this effect of kind of capturing how the speaker of the poem, who was the main character in the book, feels about Anon, who's this boy in her class. So when we're thinking about the poetry analysis playlist assignment, what I'm really asking you to do here is to think first about the sense or meaning of the poem, and that is what goes in the summary area. And then think about the message of the poem. What does the poem want us to understand? And then finally, think about the techniques of the poems. So I put this down at the bottom. You have a bunch of poems to choose from, but this long list of excerpts, if you're interested in reading some of the Poet-X or all of it, you can click here and select from the excerpts. Okay, so this is a long section of the poem or of the novel, like almost 100 pages of it. And then if you are interested in it, there's also linked off of your Poet-X kind of one pager. There's an early chapter of the book, which is, there's a video of it here, and a preview of the first part of the book, which you can access here. So this will let you kind of scroll through and read a sample from the book, from the opening section of it. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover with you guys today in terms of clarifying this, but I'm hoping, I guess, that you have some questions about where this is headed or what you need. So I'll just kind of stop my video and hang out, and then if you have any questions, I can address those. You can either unmute yourself and ask the question for the whole class, or add a question in the chat. All right.